It's interesting, I never started with a business plan. I had none of that at all. It was actually more about purpose and values and impact on society and, the macro issues. I keep relearning the power of people. If you have exceptional people, they attract exceptional people.
This week, a man who leads one of the top 5 companies changing the world, Adrian Gore, on the High Performance Podcast.
I really believe the fundamental attribute of success is a sense of urgency and a sense of positivity. Stuff happens, we'll fall into holes, but listen, we'll figure it out. Once you set a goal, you have something to lose. People don't act on potential gain, they act on potential loss. But the thing I learned, which is interesting, I guess obvious, is the ability to withstand pain. These great people do what unsuccessful people are just not prepared to do. One thing I'm a great believer in, time is incredibly short. It's not linear, it gets shorter as you get older. The reality is you mustn't burn time on anything that doesn't give you meaning or happiness.
Listen, I want to say a massive thank you to all of our new subscribers, but most people that watch this content on YouTube don't subscribe. I want to change that. The more subscribers, then the more amazing we can make High Performance. And I've had a lovely message actually from Rob, who says, I only recently discovered the High Performance channel and I watched the full Eddie Howe and Tyson Fury interviews, both some of the best content I've seen in the last 5 years on YouTube. Listen, if you agree and you want to keep this amazing stuff coming for free, then hit subscribe right now. Thank you so much. Well, look, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start as we always do. In your mind, what represents high performance?
I think high performance, is represented by, real impact that changes people. And it's something that's very, very hard to achieve, and it must be a force for good, in my view. So, off the cuff, I would say it is about impact, it is about achievement, but I think it must have a sense of purpose and morality to it.
And that actually rings true with the life that you've lived and the business that you've created. Let's talk about Discovery. One of the most impressive businesses on the planet, one of the most impactful businesses on the planet. You regularly named the top CEO in South Africa. So let's talk about where this all started from, because you get entrepreneurial people, you get people that are doers and graft, but it's the big thinking that I'm interested in. Where did this mindset of having a positive impact as well as being an elite business person come from?
I think the start of Discovery was decades back when Nelson Mandela was kind of coming out of prison, the end of apartheid. And the idea of starting a health insurance company was the vision, the entrepreneurial vision. It always from the get-go, I think in our position, was about doing good for people. But the breakthrough was, certainly in South Africa at that time, just the huge levels of disease burden, HIV, AIDS, a huge amount of people that are sick, and too few doctors. So, how do you, the problem statement was, how do you build a sustainable health insurance company in that kind of environment? And our breakthrough was the simple idea of, could we make people healthier? Could we incentivize people to do healthy things? And that was the start of Vitality, which was the concept of, in a sense, just creating incentives, all kinds of things to live in a healthy way. What happened to us, I guess, is that the world, kind of technology, the understanding in our industry that a lot of risk is behavioral, you make choices, and the power of purpose, that kind of gave the model global relevance, and we've kind of really escalated across the world. In the UK, as you know, Vitality is for us a very important part of our business. So it came out of really trying to solve a narrow problem of funding healthcare in a very complex environment. I think most great businesses do come out of solving difficult issues, often in hostile, complex environments. But I would say to you, I'd add also, I think what has made the business very successful is it's been based on the concept of a simple purpose, make people healthier. So while it's a complex technology actuarial business, it's got a very simple purpose, make people healthier, and a set of values. And I think in our industry, what's fantastic is when people are healthier, we are more profitable. So there's no dissonance. In other words, if we do well for our customers, they do well for us. And so we've had this amazing shared value mindset of just, there's no downside. The better we do, the better they do. We're all totally and completely aligned. So the business has just rolled, and it's been the most wonderful journey for us, I think. And just over time, we now have 40 million customers across the world, and we have the real potential, I think, of reshaping financial services into this idea of shared value. So it's been really it's been hard work, but it's been an easy journey, ironically.
So, Adrian, can I ask you around this message about the power of purpose? Because we read about it a lot, like the Jim Collins, the good to great of having this eternal core, and the strategy will change regularly. But I'm interested in speaking to somebody that can tell us about why purpose is so powerful and how it influences your day-to-day decision making and pretty much everything around your business. Would you just go into a little bit more detail about that for us?
Well, I think that first, I think purpose should come first before the business in a way. So if you're trying to retrofit a purpose on, it's not really authentic. I think if the purpose shapes the business, then you've got something authentic that you're building. In other words, it's your North Star. The products may come and go, as you say, the strategies come and go. But if you are true to the purpose, then you have some sense of longevity, and some real journey ahead. The other point is that purpose is fundamental, I think, in motivating the best people. You attract great people when they see a purpose of nobility. I don't think people are attracted to a business just trying to make money or a quick buck. I think people, especially today where you're dealing with ambiguity, complexity, highly skilled data science people, clinical people, etc., people like that want to see, I think all people want to see purpose in something that has positive impact on society. So to an extent, I think purpose allows you to attract the best people. It gives you a North Star. It lets you ride the very difficult times with a sense of confidence. And I think, what's the counterfactual? No purpose and a focus on just profitability. I don't think it's durable. So we were, I think, lucky starting out with that purpose as a necessity, and it just became, we were kind of purpose and values based rather than rules based, and it just kind of perpetuated.
So can you give us a specific example, say when you've been sat round a board table and the purpose has helped you decide a business decision that you might not invest in or a direction that you might not travel, how that sense of that original purpose has determined your strategy? Could you give us a specific example?
Well, I think in the business context, we have expanded the model by continuously drawing back on the purpose. So we took it from health into life insurance into banking now, that if we help people manage their money better, it's better for them and better for us. So the shared value purpose, it's financial health, but it's the same idea. And then we've kind of migrated it to doing good for society. So we are, for example, in the South African context, we have a problem of, it sounds bizarre, terrible potholes in the roads, which create fatalities. And so, we invest a lot of money on fixing potholes, bizarrely. It wasn't a business endeavor, but we said this is our purpose. In the rollout of the vaccine during COVID, we vaccinated, a couple million people. We were central to the response with government. So all of us in the boardroom, the narrative was about, does this fit into our concept of make people healthier? And we've just rolled on that purpose. So it's a fundamental filter around what we do. And the concept of vitality is now in health, it's in banking, vitality money, it's in how you drive, drive safer. So I think the irony of purpose is while the organization has got more complex and more diverse over time, the actual architecture of using the shared value vitality structure has got more and more disciplined. We become more focused, not less. And I think that is the power of purpose. You don't lose focus. You don't become spread out and kind of, diluted.
So if there was any young entrepreneurs listening to this then that might be wanting to go on a similar journey to you, can you give us some insights as to how they could go about identifying that really compelling sense of purpose that you did back in the early 90s?
Well, I think that if you, listen, this is my view, but I think that if you are setting out a business as an entrepreneur, I think you have to have a product or a service you truly believe society wants. I think you have to have something that you believe you can sell. And my sense is embedded in that product or service should be a purpose. It helps people or helps society. If you have that, I think around that you can build a narrative that is inspiring and you can build a business. But that's not sufficient. That's not sufficient. There's a sense of drive and urgency and driving for achievement, and innovation, and that's needed. It's not enough. But it's the fundamental start. And it's an incredibly perpetuating multiplicative effect, having a strong purpose. Whether you're running a sports team, you're running a business, you're running a country, it is fundamental. I do have to say, so I'm digressing a bit, but I think the issue of framing a vision and a goal in any way is a fundamental purpose of leadership. And I think a business without that frame, without that purpose, it's aimless. So to me, it's kind of it's a sine qua non. It's hard to start without that, I think.
And this is a really interesting area for us to focus on, because we're talking about, your own personal wealth has been talked about and written about up in the hundreds of millions. We're talking about a business that's turned over billions of pounds over the last few years. So for it all to come from purpose, I think is a really good message for many, many entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast. But I want to go right back to that very start where you had this vision, you had this idea, but what you were planning on doing was something totally different to every other insurance business, right? So I want to talk about bravery now. You've got the vision. Where does the bravery come from to almost swim against the tide when everyone is saying, Adrian, this is not going to work. Look at what everyone else does. And they are, by the way, successful businesses that are doing it in this way. Where did the courage of your convictions come from to believe and then walk in the direction that you thought you should?
I think you're being generous with courage, maybe. I think that there was a deep conviction about the purpose and the potential of what we could do. And I think that conviction and purpose creates courage, and it takes you through. So when I raised the capital initially to start the business from a banking group that has still, been a shareholder of ours throughout, that purpose and conviction was in that initial approach. It's interesting, I never started with a business plan. I mean, it's bizarre. I'm an actuary by training. Things should be financial and cash flows and internal rates of return. And I had none of that at all. It was actually more about purpose and values and impact on society and, the macro issues. So I'm giving a long answer. My sense is that bravery and courage comes from conviction. I think if you feel you need bravery and you're taking risk, you're probably doing the wrong thing. I know there's risk inherent in what you're doing. I'm just saying if you're feeling that it's risky, that's problematic. So I probably took a massive risk. I just don't remember it.
That is interesting.
I remember the conviction, and it's the same. And our business has metamorphosized over time. It's been the purpose that has given us that guideline. It's never been we've just built a bank in our home market here. I mean, that was probably the biggest thing we've done. It had a considerable amount of risk. I don't remember feeling the risk, So I'm not sure it's the right guideline, but if you're feeling risk, you shouldn't be taking it. If you're not feeling it, you probably are at risk, but that's conviction maybe,
You see, I've always thought that in business, like a certain element of risk is where the rewards might lie. Like if you don't take a modicum of risk, can you really have an impact? Isn't everything kind of risky?
No, you're totally right. I guess I'm making the point of the paradox that if you're feeling the risk, that's problematic. You for sure are taking it.
Right.
You're taking it for sure. It's better to be on a job working for, whatever, some big bank. But if there's a risk, but I'm not convinced that you should be feeling at risk all the time. I think that the issue is you should have a sense of confidence. And I think if you don't have that confidence, that resilience, there's going to be failure all the way. You're going to hit bumps in the road unless you have this just sense, I'll roll over it. I'll find my way through it. It's that ability to kind of be realistic about risk, but also resilience to deal with it. So I'm being long-winded, but I think you are taking risk, but you shouldn't be feeling it.
And we will talk about failure in detail in a moment because it's one of the hot topics for us on High Performance. But before we get to the point where you need the failure, you have to set the business up to allow yourself to fail. So there you are, no money, no business plan, yet you managed to bring people on the journey and you managed to get people to invest to allow you to create this business. So would you mind sharing with our listeners the secret to bringing people on the journey with you and getting them to buy into your vision?
Look, again, I think that your business proposition and purpose needs to be highly convincing. That's the first, to get shareholders to invest money and then to get people to come on board. The other point I would make is I keep relearning the power of people. If you have exceptional people, they attract exceptional people. So if you start with poor quality people, I don't mean that to mean derogatory. I'm saying if you start with people that aren't up to the task, that is a self-perpetuating prophecy. On the other hand, if you start with exceptional people, for some reason it starts to roll. So, I had this mindset at the get-go that, well, we'll be small. We're going to be the smartest team there is. We're going to get the best people. And, all of the first team that joined me were all exceptional, hard work to convince them. But once they started to roll, your ability to get good people follows. And I think our team today, which is 15,000 people across the world, it's exceptional, and because we've never dropped the standards. We've been completely obsessed with absolutely exceptional people. So I think that the convincing is hard at the start, but if you get going with the right purpose and the right people, it perpetuates. It's a metronome. It starts flowing, But I come back to values as well. I think that people are, certainly exceptional people, are attracted to impact, a life of impact and a business of impact, and this kind of cognitive error people make, that you think people will be excited by shareholders making money and their hard work. I don't think that's true. I think they want to hear this business is making a difference, So it's a simple formula, not easy to achieve, but I think it's entirely doable.
So tell us about good people then. What's your definition?
I think firstly it is about a values fit. I think that you need people that share the same purpose and same values. You can have the smartest people, if they have a values misfit, that could be extremely dangerous in the business. So my view is kind of culture and values. I don't mean culture nationally. I'm saying a sense of what we're trying to achieve. I do believe, this ratio of EQ over IQ should be very carefully managed, and I think you should avoid egotistical people. IQ divided by ego must be much greater than 1. Your IQ must be much bigger than your ego. Ego unchecked is problematic. But I must say I'm a junkie for real talent. I don't mean just education. We hire incredibly smart people, but I'm saying looking into proper EQ, IQ education. I think you need to look at that stuff carefully. So there is a sense, there is a hunch I think people have when you're starting a business of good people. You need to trust that kind of intuition about who you're getting in the early days. As I say, I keep relearning. You can have the most brilliant idea with a poor team and a poor leadership team, they mess it up. And a poor idea with brilliant people, somehow they take it and they do amazing stuff with it, So I just restate the importance of people in starting a business is the most fundamental thing you can do.
So let's be really clear then with our listeners. When you have someone in front of you and you're hiring and they say to you, so what are your values, Adrian? What's the reply?
I take them through our values, but I talk about the simple issue of honesty and integrity. I talk about, I think, a drive for, societal change and impact, innovation. And I talk about the ability for people to be prudent and innovative at the same time. In other words, you don't want risky people. You want people that can innovate and change the world, but they have a sense of reality about risk and downside. And I'm very, very focused on people who have a sense of urgency and positivity. I believe the biggest issue in success is about the ability to be positive, not be unrealistically naive. But I don't care how good people are. There are negative people around. They're problematic. It's a pessimist, and I really believe the fundamental attribute of success is a sense of urgency and a sense of positivity. And that's not linked to IQ. It's unrelated. It's not linked to education. It's kind of it's a sense of how people see the world, and I find that critical. I need people that are urgent, that see time is short, and that people have a sense of positivity, a positive disposition. Things are soluble. There will be stuff happens. We'll fall into holes, but listen, we'll figure it out. So it's not they're not measurable by testing necessarily, but there are things you can gain through listening to people's life journey and talking to them. And the issue of positivity, I can't tell you. Certainly, we've come from a country of considerable complexity. I think elsewhere in the world today, the ability to seek positive signals is the fundamental attribute of success and of leadership, I think.
Could you explain how you do that?
Well, I think firstly, just let me give you a bit of some basis for it. I mean, it's important to know this, we're coded to be negative. I mean, we evolved in the world where dangers were physical, so that if you didn't seek the negative, you got eaten by a lion. So if you study evolutionary biology, we are survivors of people who are negative, right? The positive guys died off, that didn't watch the lion, so to speak. So we are descendants of negative people, right? The issue is that the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution happened, over the last 100 years, a couple thousand years. So we miscoded. The world today is a function of systems and businesses and organizations, not of physical structures. So to make systems work, governments, businesses, you need positive thinking. You need to create trust, communication, loyalty. Those are a function of the ability to be positive. So I think to make the point, being negative is a primitive urge. Being positive is a sophisticated urge. Whereas the world today, if you're positive, people think you're being silly, you're being unrealistic. So to your question, sorry, I'm being long-winded. It's fundamentally, I think, about seeking the positive signals. I don't mean being unrealistic. I mean looking at things, understanding risk, But where's the positives here? Seek the positive. It doesn't come naturally to us. We're coded to look for the negatives. So in every situation, I think to your point, I think you need to try and figure out where are the positives here, and to get back to setting a goal or setting a purpose, that naturally, I think, evokes a sense of hope and positivity, a sense of agency. When you set a goal that's yours, naturally, it gives you, something to work towards. You get a sense of agency, a sense of hope. So there are tricks, I think, to doing it and props to doing it, but I think it requires application. It doesn't come naturally to us. We're naturally negative. That's why we're here.
So someone is lucky enough to be sitting in front of the man who runs the business that Fortune magazine has named as one of the top 5 companies changing the world, right? And he gets the chance to ask them one question. What is the one question that you ask of those people to find out what they're really like?
I'm actually not good at one question, but I would probably probe the positive. I'll probably probe, how do you see the future in our country or your environment, and try and understand how they deconstruct things around them, how they connect the dots around them, as to what they think might happen. And I think that would give me really good insight.
Adrian, you're very modest. You keep on telling us that you don't know what the answer is, and then you go on some brilliant 2-minute long answer.
You're asking tough questions.
But Adrian, can I ask you around your role then as a leader of such a large group of people? Because we recently interviewed Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, that spoke about for you as a leader, you almost need to accept that your message needs to be repeated at least 6 times before you be confident that everybody at every level of the organization understands it. So for you to be this optimistic leader driven by this powerful sense of purpose, how do you go about communicating that to the thousands of people that work with you?
Well, I think there's a number of, the ways of doing it through the methodology of webinars. I'm doing one tomorrow to our entire base, for the year end. But our message is quite simple. I mean, I think the strategy, make people healthier, how it plays out is simple. So and we spend a lot of time on values and purpose. So actually, my sense, if you spoke to people on the ground in our organization anywhere, I think they'd tell you the purpose and the values and would have some sense of the strategy. So again, it's just, I hope it's an appropriate answer. I'm making the point, I guess, if your strategy keeps changing and your purpose isn't solid and you have to keep refreshing it, I think you've got a complex problem. If you're telling the same story all the time and it's authentic and I think there's reality, there's some fragility, we haven't done well there, we've got to improve. I didn't do well here, I need to, I think that creates a sense of context that makes the strategy realistic. But I guess I'm maybe making the point, I think in my own journey, telling the same strategy, maybe the goals get bigger, the same way, with the same framing, the same narrative, creates in people, I think, a sense of continuity, and I think people do understand that.
But because I can see real parallels between your sense of purpose that you have, and if you go back into the archives, you look at Walt Disney with the whole thing of the Disney Corporation was about making people happy, and all the different variations of that, whether that was theme parks or the animation shows on TV. So, and yet Walt Disney was great at almost tying that into symbols, around whether it was making sure that the park was always clean, there's always a bin every 10 yards and things like that, because it all fits into this idea of the happiest place on earth. I'm interested in the symbolism of acts or gestures that you do, that people can link it into this sense of purpose of making people healthier. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, maybe 2 thoughts. One is the Vitality program itself is intuitively simple. So when we started this idea of giving you points and incentives and rewards for doing healthy things, that was kind of almost the breakthrough. It was almost like an air miles program in those days. You kind of earn points and you had a status, and that gave you, so that intuitive construct, I think, was a platform upon which we built. The other point is our industry is transactional. You pay a premium and you get you claim. It's such a transactional, industry. By creating a world where you're making people healthier through earning points and getting incentives and going to gyms, and the whole frame is different. So I think we had the opportunity to create a completely different industry in a way. And then I think we use a lot of symbolism. If you look at the Vitality structure, we are very focused on, for example, the idea of vitality with inverted T. That's more an industry speak, how the model looks. So there's a lot of There's a lot of iconic symbolism we use. And we've worked hard on, for example, in the UK, you may have seen our dog Stanley, the Dachshund, who's the antagonist, who's lazy, who's always trying to tell society, I don't want to do this stuff, this is terrible. So we've created a very disciplined, I think, iconic approach to what we do, even in the symbolism, almost in the actuarial calculations, how we play things out. It is structured. So it's a very disciplined, I think, marketing face, R&D process, icons, but the actual how Vitality works is, you may have seen, it's wherever you go in the world, whether you're sitting in Hong Kong with AIA or in China with Ping On or in the US, it's the same stuff, looks and feels the same. So repeatability gives it, I think, meaning.
But then I also see, like you referenced, the business came into being around the same time that Mandela was released from Robben Island in the early 1990s. And there's lots of symbolic gestures that Mandela did that, for those of us outside of South Africa, still resonate. Like in the 95 World Cup, where he wore the Springboks jersey when he handed the trophy to Francois Pienaar, that was like seismic in your country. I'm interested for you, like you're almost the leader of a small country in terms of the people that work with you. And I know that you've done some quite significant steps to almost set this idea of living a healthier life and show that anything is possible. I'm talking about your attempts to run the mile in under 5 minutes, and I'm interested in why that's such an important symbolic gesture from you.
I think where the idea came from was from the data, the power of physical activity. We see it all the time. It is fundamental in a longer, better life, in mental health, in cancer treatment. It's a fundamental issue. So our data shows how unequivocal physical activity is. So we are always trying to promote it. That was one issue. The other issue is, certainly my sense is, as hopefully I've got across, the issue when you set a goal, life is different. I keep relearning that in the business. Setting audacious goals to get you forward is fundamental. So we had this simple idea of, could we set an audacious goal that kind of highlighted the power of physical activity? So, the issue was, could a decrepit 58-year-old CEO run a 5-minute mile? That's kind of the, and if that's possible, what happened is we set this goal out there and on LinkedIn, and the receptivity has been unbelievable. So it's not really about me running a mile. The truth is, it's been about the power of goals, setting goals, and the stuff I've heard from people. Forget about physical activity. The sense of hope. People who've just suffered cancer setting their own goal of something. Someone's gone to do a PhD. We've had I think 1.5 million hits on this process. It's been remarkable. So it came from a simple idea. Could we create a narrative about physical activity, but more so the power of setting goals? Most people just don't do that. They really don't. It's so, as you get older, few people have goals. I mean, that's in my experience, and it's a tragedy. It's a lost opportunity. Once you set a goal, you have something to lose. You invoke loss aversion. We know loss aversion is inspiring. People don't act on potential gain, they act on potential loss. So setting the goal, as I've got, I'm frantic about trying to achieve this goal because I've got something to lose. It's my own, I created this own madness. You know what I'm saying? But that's what you need, unfortunately, So it's been a fantastic journey of listening and learning from people. It's been so inspiring,
Well, let's talk then about when you've listened and what you've learned, because I know that as part of your goal setting, as part of this challenge, you have you've spoken to some very bright minds. Sebastian Coe, the former athlete, you've spoken with Professor Dan Ariely as well to get some information from him. We would love you to share with us those kind of nuggets of knowledge, because being a lifelong learner, right, as I'm sure you know, is magic. So even at 58, when you've done all you've done and achieved all you've achieved, I'm sure these people have said things where you've gone, why didn't I know that 30 years ago when I was setting goals? What have you learned from them, and what would you like to share with us?
It was an absolute treat speaking to people of that quality. And these goals that they set were all different. So you think of a Sebastian Coe, who was a miler and a 1,500-meter Olympian, etc. His goals were defined by rules of athletics. I chatted to Alex Honnold, who climbed El Capitan, that rock face free solo. The goal is not defined. As a climber, you've got to define a goal that's not yet really defined. So there's creativity in that. But I guess the commonality I learned was just the preparation. It's unbelievable. You know, these people set goals that, you know, we can only dream of. And then the level of preparation to get there, you know, you listen, you know, Seb Coe's point about he prepared for every eventuality. So when he got to the race, he was like, you know, I know it's going to happen here. You know, to climb a mountain, you know, this guy, Alex, actually did every single centimeter on that mountain. But the thing I learned, which is interesting, I guess obvious, is the ability to withstand pain. You know, that last few hundred meters in a race, or the last climb, you know, whatever it might be. And I guess my kind of lasting feeling is these great people do what unsuccessful people are just not prepared to do. You know, that's kind of the tragedy of it. You know, I'm saying they are prepared to do things that we aren't. You know, and, you know, that's where I think what we're trying to do is to tell people you've got to push harder. You know, whatever that may be. And I also guess I learned a sense of fragility. Everyone, no matter what you see from the outside, has this fragility, how they got there, their doubts, their, you know. So nothing unintuitive, but all of it inspiring and unbelievably cerebral. These people are unbelievably clever in deconstructing their goal and what needs to be done. I mean, Seb's view about not incrementalism, but incremental performance. If you can do a 6-minute mile, you can do a 5-minute mile. If you can do a 5-minute mile, you can do a 4-minute mile. I mean, obviously, there's some asymptote there, you know, that you hit. But that mindset of just, you know, of that cerebral improvement. So, you know, directionally, they're always saying the same thing, but it is about courage. It's about the ability to withstand pain, you know. Remarkable.
Mm. There's also a sadness in that as well, Adrian, isn't there? I mean, we were joined by Mark Webber, the Formula One driver, who said to us, average is easy. That's why it's popular. You know, and as you've just said, they are prepared to do the things that most people are not prepared to do. And the sadness there is that most people can, but they just choose not to, or their brain doesn't allow them to believe that they're worthy of doing those things and pushing themselves to those limits. And there is a sadness in that.
Oh, there's absolute. People can do the most amazing things. I think that's why just the discipline of trying to get people to set a goal, because I think that's the catalyst. Without that, you just go along, you know, in your life. I mean, Alex Honnold, who climbed El Capitan, the thing he told me, what I found amazing, is most of us are optimizing to have the longest life possible at any cost. Whereas I think it's more about meaning and impact. You know, maybe a shorter life with a bit more meaning. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that's a calculation a climber may have, that there's meaning in what he or she's doing, and it's worth the risk in some way. I don't know. But there is something sad, I think, about going through life without achieving potential. There's greatness in everyone. I think you know, we have to try and get people to set goals, to evoke that sense of pressure, how to get it out. Because I think most people do go through life, unfortunately, not achieving their potential, whatever that may be. And this 5-minute mile idea has taken me right to the coalface of that, of seeing and listening to what the amazing things people can do. It's unbelievable.
So will you tell us then, Adrian, about how a listener could go about setting a goal in their own life? It may be a little bit more modest than doing a 5-minute mile or scaling El Capitan. But for somebody that's listening to this now, what are the first couple of steps that they can take to setting a goal in their life?
Well, I think, and I'm putting it out there, but I think you need to set a goal that has meaning to you. You know, there is a lot of science in the science of hope for people with terminal illness about, you know, how they give people hope is what's important to you ultimately, and set that goal. You know, so it may be a fast run, it may be something else. It's seldom about making money. I mean, that's an important issue. It's got to be something that's authentic. But I think choosing something that means something to you, whether it means anything to anyone else or it's impressive or not, I think it has to have meaning. I think it's got to have some degree of stretch. I think if it's just doable, it's not, you don't have it out there. I think if it's too stretched, you're not going to get that, maybe demotivating. You know, some of the dialogue with Dan Ariely on behavioral science around, you know, what is that optimal point? But my sense is that setting something that's meaningful to you, something that's really, it may be audacious with some stretch, gives you a sense of agency and hope. And that just brings out in you the most remarkable journey. It's life-changing. So, you know, I don't think it requires a huge amount of intelligence. I think it's just, you know, thinking it through and doing it.
And among all of this, I do want to touch on happiness, because I do have this feeling that when we're too obsessed with goal setting, we delay our happiness. So all too often, people delay their happiness to achieve success, believing that the success is the thing that's going to give them the happiness that they delayed in the first place. And then they achieve the success and realize that actually they are no happier for the thing they've achieved. The joy actually came on the journey, but they delayed that initial happiness for the success. It feels completely kind of back to front to me. So I think we should just talk about the fact that as brilliant as goal setting is, as important it is to challenge yourself and push yourself and find your limits and not settle for average and believe that you deserve to achieve and feel and experience great things. Do you also believe that we mustn't delay our happiness until we've achieved those things? We have to realize that actually I think that the joy comes from the challenge, from the journey, from the process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the journey is everything. That's why I think the goals should be meaningful and the journey towards it should be appreciated. I mean, in my mad 5-minute mile dash, and I haven't got there yet, but the actual journey of seeing the improvement in, and getting up at 5 a.m. to hit the road and seeing the beautiful sun, stuff I haven't done. It's been an amazing journey. So I'm a great believer. If you set a proper, meaningful goal, whether you achieve it or not, you're happier than you would have been. And I think you're right. I think we chase the wrong things and we finally get there. If we do and find we wasted our lives, It is about the journey. But then I think all the more important then to set a journey on a course that is meaningful. Because, one thing I'm a great believer in, time is incredibly short. It's, it's not linear. It gets shorter as you get older. So the reality is you mustn't burn time on anything that doesn't give you meaning or happiness. And I totally agree with what you've said.
So can I ask you around that then, about time? Because I look at the success that you've had in your career and I wonder about balance, about how do you apportion your time in terms of with family, with friends, with social activities, running a business, then introducing an ambitious stretch goal like a 5-minute mile. How do you go about balancing all of those different demands?
Look, I'm skeptical about balance in an absolute sense. I think balance is a relative issue. You've got to decide what's important to you and then balance it out. So I'm not, some people think family. I believe family and my career and making an impact is important. So that's what I prioritize. I don't do other things. I don't waste time on things that then consume time away from that. So you may look at me and say I'm very, unbalanced, but in my priorities, I'm balanced. I'm making the point. I think balance is not an absolute quality. It's a relative one. What is important to you? I've been able to work very hard and been very close to my family. That's all I value. My wife and my kids and my extended family. I spend my time with them. And I've managed to fit this stuff in. So I'm now getting up an hour or two earlier. I'm enjoying it. I'm going to bed a bit earlier to make sure I can do it. So not being patronizing, it's doable. It's doable. I think where you get unstuck is when you have a bunch of issues you're pursuing that are not important to you and you're wasting time on them. So I'm proud of the fact I've had a very busy career. I've worked really hard. I've traveled all the time on the road. I'm great friends with my kids. I'm close to them. I've never, I don't know about you. I don't want to have any regrets. And I just don't. So I think you've got to test what's important to you and then, kind of back solve how you allocate the hours. I don't think you should be lulled into, applying a set of balance that the outside world feels is appropriate. But I do think, and I hope this isn't unpopular, I do think that achieving real impact takes time. You've got to apply yourself. It doesn't, some people are lucky. For most of us, it's hard graft. And you've got to allocate the time to it to achieve it, I think. And that's got to be factored into your balance.
What is your golden tip for remaining productive?
I think fitness and sleep. I know that sounds simple, but I believe it. That's been my experience. Getting enough sleep and you staying physically active, you will be productive and you don't feel the fatigue. I have stairs in my office here, in our head office here. It's a brutal 8-story building. I do it. It takes me 1 minute, 9 seconds when I'm feeling good, a bit long when I'm feeling...
Oh, you're so competitive. You're timing yourself up the stairs.
That's brilliant.
2 or 3 times a day of that, and I'm super fit. That's 3 minutes a day.
Yeah.
3 minutes a day. Anyone can fit that in,
And what about distractions? Because, you've got your children and your family and your business and no doubt other investments and other interests. And, you're I often look at CEOs and businesses as like a scratching post for a cat. Everyone comes to you with their problems. So how do you remain productive, remain focused on the main goal when you have so many distractions and demands?
I try to stay disciplined. I'm not that good at it. My schedules may be too busy, but I think you've got to be disciplined. You've got to say no to the things that are not important. You just got to do that. If you can't, I think it's actually the difference between a life well lived and a life of chaos. You have to all say no to the things that just don't matter. I think it's important. And that's, ultimately, I think the things that they should be close to, the things that then matter. And that's what you are seeking. Certainly I am. There's no golden rule here. I mean, I hope I don't come across as I know it all. I've just made choices in my own life that I don't feel a sense of regret, which is maybe the golden test.
But tell us about saying no and doing it with certainty and purpose and almost a degree of elegance. That's something that I'm intrigued about. I'm not particularly good at it, but I'm interested in people that have that as a skill.
I'm actually particularly bad at it, like you. I promise you. I have a soft skin, a thin skin. I don't like saying no to people. I don't. So I'm probably less efficient than I should be. But I value relationships. I value people's opinion of me and our organization. So I do take the time to say no gently, Also, I think running a business that has customers, you must be available to your customers. However you do it. We have structures. I have teams of people that are, looking at emails and, but the sense that people feel we care, which we do. So I'm not the kind of CEO who's, who's absolutely disciplined, but somehow I've muddled through, I've stayed true to my sense of balance.
And if somebody wants you to say yes to something, how should they frame it?
I think with purpose and integrity. I'm kind of a sucker for that, In reality, I'm not a hard sell, egotistical. I think the world has changed. I think a sense of proper purpose, authenticity, some fragility that there's risk, there are issues, I'm taken into that. But for me personally, rigor and intelligence is important. I can sense in a person real ability of what they're bringing across, and it's, you develop a sixth sense for that kind of judgment, I think.
There's something I really want to touch on that we mentioned earlier, which was failure. There will be people listening to this, and I think it's been full of wisdom, great takeaways. It's exactly what this podcast exists to do. People don't have to listen to every word you say and follow it and believe it. But what we're saying is the life that you've lived has lessons that can be lessons for their life. So what would you share with us when we talk about failure? Because there's no way you get to where you've got to without being able to deal with it. And in a business of your size, you're fighting fires every minute of every day, I would imagine. So what's your relationship like with failure?
I think the less you fail, the better. I know that sounds obvious, but I think there's some romanticism about failing and getting up, and I think that is true. But the less failure you have, the better. I think, and I may be wrong on this, but the science today shows that our brain learns from success, not failure. So the less you fail, the better. But if you do fail, I think you shouldn't internalize it. I think you need to get up and forget about it, move on. We started a company in the US, I remember in our early days, that failed eventually. But, people often ask me about our initiative there. The truth is everything we've done globally is from the lessons we learned in that failure. We wouldn't be global today without having gone through that. So I didn't internalize it then as, this is a great thing. I'm learning from it. It was a terrible thing. It was a lot of pain. But ironically, it was a catalyst for amazing stuff. So my sense is failure should not be your friend. You should avoid it if you can. If it happens, I wouldn't revel in it. I'd learn from it and move on. And you need to, I think it's fundamental, you need to accept there's going to be failure all the time. There's going to be challenges all the time. There's something about, I know it sounds kind of hackneyed, but there's something about facing a problem head on, of accepting and not running from it. We've had many problems. I know we've run from them, avoided them. Our best moments have been when you kind of turn into them and say, listen, I'm coming head on at you. I don't give a hoot in hell. I'm going to solve this problem. It's that I don't know, that resolve around this thing is real. I've got to attack it head on. And that it's probably similarly evoking to the goal setting mindset, that suddenly solving that problem becomes a challenge. Rather, you're not running from it. So I don't know, kind of reveling in failure, running from failure are bad things. I think learning from failure and facing failure head on with courage and saying, right, how do I deal with this? I think most of our best products, best ideas have often come from very, very difficult challenges that we've had. And I'm a great believer you build a business in difficult times. That's when real brilliance comes out. The Mandela time I spoke about was a time of great uncertainty for our country where others were emigrating or not investing. I think ironically, it's those times where assets are underpriced, opportunities are overlooked where you can strike. So to an extent, seeing failure as a learning opportunity, taking it head on, looking at difficult times as times to build. I think those are ironically, they're obvious but counterintuitive. Most people do the wrong thing. They invest when prices are high, when the markets are fluffy. But I would be saying, accept failure, quickly and move on. Don't revel in it.
Because the message we've had from so many of our high performance interview guests, Adrian, has been around the idea of that almost embrace failure, that see it as Greg Hoffman, the chief marketing officer from Nike, told us that failure is the price of success. So you almost have to bake it in to into your own process, and then do the element that you've described of then face it head on and learn from it. So what would you describe as the most significant failure that you've had that's led to the greatest learning?
Well, I think we started a health insurance in America, as I said, called Destiny Health. It was an idiotic idea. It's about an audacious goal. Here's a bunch of guys in our late 20s. We've just started out in our South Africa. We started a health insurer in Chicago. But we got remarkably far. We just couldn't get the price points, that the big health insurers got for healthcare. And that kind of made it impossible to really keep going. But when we closed that business down, there was a sense of failure. But I think to that point, we learned a lot from that. And the opportunity to take those learnings, we came into the UK and into other markets in Asia, etc., were all from that point of failure. So the price of failure, I think, there was a price to it, but the lessons were absolutely and totally remarkable. I mean, I kind of believe that, what's that? Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions. That chain of logic, just is so true. But again, I think if you can avoid failure, do it. Yeah.
Sure. But then would you tell us around that, around the process? Because I think lots of people want to avoid failure, or they've had those experiences. But I think what you've described there of the ability to face into it, would you tell us about the actual process, about how you and those colleagues that tried to set up that business in America came together after that experience to process it?
I think there's a point where you recognize failure. In other words, I think oftentimes you run from it, you delay it. In businesses, you put it off, you kick the can down the road, things are going to turn around. So there is an art at some point to saying, we've got trouble here, and we face it head on. So I think that sounds obvious, but it often isn't. People take a long time to come to a realization that the car's in a skid. I think once you do that, I think there's an art of actually laying out in a proper consensus building way what the problems are and how you fix them and what you need to do. And I think what our business has done well has been very smart people always adding acupoints together by building a consensus view, not taking hard decisions based on one person's ego. So we try and analyze where the issues are, and then you've got to take hard decisions, and I think that you shouldn't be embarrassed for the failure. I think in any kind of personal failure, I think it's the same as the goal setting. I think having tried in the first place is the virtue. You shouldn't be hard on yourself. You've got to stand up, keep your head high. We've done the wrong thing. We've tried our best. There's something in that, we can only do our best and solve it. But as I say, I think the pernicious side of failure is not admitting it, letting it run, letting it keep running and not taking the hard decisions. I think the earlier you call it, the quicker you deal with it and the quicker you get over it is to me a fundamental issue. And if you do that well, when you look back, I don't really remember the failures. It's a bit like the paradox earlier of this issue of risk. We've had tremendous failures. I just don't remember them. I think that's a good thing.
Listen, we're going to move on to our quickfire questions in a moment, but there's just one thing you said earlier on that I wanted to pick up on, which is it's been hard work, but an easy journey. Would you just explore that for us for a moment?
Well, I think that building anything, whatever career, certainly building our business of scale, takes hours and hours and hours, of just hard graft. But the actual content and the progress has been so rewarding that it hasn't felt like work. It's felt like an absolute pleasure, and I think that's certainly it's something that I've been lucky to have. When I drive in, wherever I go, I get a sense of incredible feeling of we've done well. Not financially, we're making an impact. So it hasn't felt like a grind to me, and I think that's a treat if you can achieve that, in life. It's a fundamental issue. I think nothing is more important than that. So it has been hard work, 10, 15-hour days, all the time. There is never a day when there isn't work to be done. But the meaning of it and the impact has been remarkable. I mean, I don't know who said, I worked hard. I enjoyed my work so much I never worked a day in my life. I don't know who said that, but there's something to that. If you can achieve that in life, what a pleasure.
Yeah, I think that quote's been attributed to William Shakespeare, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Mother Teresa. They've all, at one time or another, all of them have been attributed with, if you make your passion your job, you never need to work again for a day in your life. Yeah, you're totally right. Right. Let's move on to our quickfire questions. What are the 3 non-negotiables that you and the people around you have to buy into, Adrian?
I think positivity, doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think being honest, I know doing the right thing, being honest are similar, but I think those 3 are fundamental.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
Probably the start again, because I think it was romantic and unbelievably exciting. But ironically, I might say yesterday, because the journey's been additive. You know what I mean? It feels better, so I'm not convinced, I want to go back much,
There is a good lesson, though, for people listening to this that are obsessed with the end destination rather than the journey, the fact that you've achieved all you have and you'd still like to go back to the beginning. It's a good reminder that it is about the journey. What is your biggest weakness? What is your greatest strength?
I think the point earlier, I'm a poor decision maker, and I don't say no well. I think it's a virtue to it, but it's a weakness ultimately. I think my strength is optimism. I think I see opportunity and I can connect the dots to get there. I think that's how I'm coded, I guess.
What advice would you give to a teenage Adrian just starting out?
I think pursue something with purpose and be positive and urgent in getting there. There'll be bumps in the road, but you just don't give up. There's always a solution.
What is the thing that you feel people most get wrong or misunderstand about you?
I think that often mistake my optimism for naivety, which I believe it's not. I'm a believer optimism is not in my case, but I think it's a sophisticated quality necessarily.
And finally, what's your one golden rule for people to live a high-performance life?
It's either positivity or urgency. If you give me the luxury of choosing both, it's not IQ. You need to have a purpose that's moral, but given that, I think positivity and urgency, speed, urgency, knowing time is limited, because it is.
I love the fact that you've picked up on that. We often talk about memento mori, which is the way the Stoics spoke. Remember that you're dying, which people think is a negative, but actually is a fantastic positive. Let's fast forward 100 years. The size of your business is probably so big, there's a strong likelihood it's still around. But you and us and everyone we've ever met, including our children, certainly won't be. So I think there's something to be said for making the most of every day. It's been a really interesting conversation. Honestly, thank you so much, Adrian, for taking the time and sharing with us what has been a remarkable journey. And by the sounds of things, with your optimism and your urgency and your clear energy and the fact you can do the stairs in 1 minute 9, despite the fact there's 8 floors, I think there's a lot of chapters still to be written.
Appreciate it. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. It's been a real treat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a quick one to say thank you so much for watching this content on the High Performance channel. We would love it if you would subscribe. Most people that watch what we do don't subscribe. If you can subscribe, we can make this bigger, better, bolder than we've ever done before. So hit subscribe right now and help the High Performance podcast make a real difference to the world. See you soon.